recording in progress. We welcome Gail Scholes from Zenergi, Richard Barnes from Towergate, Kate Barnes, no relation, completely different Barnes, from the BNSSG Healthier Together People Programme, and Stuart Farrer from Citation. You're all very welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. As I've just said, we will be recording the session and the recording will go up on our website as soon as I can manage the technology. If you'd like to put questions in the chat box as we go along for people to pick up, me to pick up if I'm not sharing my screen. But if it's easier for you, we've asked each of the speakers to leave about 5 minutes of their time for a Q&A. So there will be time within that. So you might prefer to hold the thought and you can come off mute and ask your question personally. If things get a little bit away from generic questions, because we're recording, then you're welcome to take it offline. And I see Nigel has put a link in for any questions for Citation. So thank you. It may interest you to know that I'm currently developing our workshop programme for the next 6 months or so, and I would welcome suggestions from people on subject matter. Our aim here is to meet your needs, so do tell me what they are. I also want to remind you of the work we're doing at Care and Support West within the Better Security, Better Care project, and how we can support you to complete the Data Security Protection Toolkit, which, believe me, is not easy to say, much easier to say DSPT. So for that, do look at our website. And while you're there are just a few tickets left for our wonderful awards evening on the 9th of October at Ashton Gate. Oh, what's happened to my screen? Sorry, that's better. Hope you didn't see all of that. I don't know where that came from. So yes, 9th of October, Ashton Gate. We're looking forward to having our awards evening, again, having missed last year. So Gail, I'm going to share screen and pop up your slides now and hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. That's great. If we can just put the first one up. If we can try and make these a little bit bigger as well, Angela, so I can read them when we go through. That would be great. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so firstly, just a quick introduction. I'm Gail Scholes, work at Zenergi, and yeah, I'm head of local authorities, housing and the care home sector. So if we can go into a little bit about Zenergi, for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We started in 2003, and we were set up to serve the education sector. And it was at a time when, you know, we were really looking at competitive energy prices, which is what we did predominantly. But we've moved into a lot of other areas since then. And one of the key areas that we've moved into is energy management. So we also do compliance services, so everything from air conditioning units to decks. And with the acquisitions that we've currently made over the last 3 years, we've actually bought a number of other businesses. So we bought Power Direct in 2021, which is now rebranded under Zenergi. We also bought a company called Briar quite recently, and Briar bring to the table a number of other elements, such as they're all chartered engineers, so we can now do all your decarbonisation work and help you with achieving all of your carbon reduction targets. Okay. So energy procurement, just a few bits to sort of pull out on energy procurement. We provide energy expertise and guidance to help you choose the right supplier. I think this is really important, particularly at the moment, because I think some of the prices that are starting to come through for renewals are particularly high at the moment, and that's because of the change in gas prices in the market. We'll also look at contract lengths, and for those of you who have a number of different sites, you know, it's quite important to try and get all of those contracts and start dates all in one place. So that's the sort of thing we can help you with. We also look kind of 5 years ahead, and we'll look at all the favourable markets. So to give you an idea in terms of energy and how much energy we actually trade as a group, we're trading at around about 4 terajoules now. So we have access to a fair amount of competitive energy prices, and more importantly now, access to green energy. So we're looking at 100% renewable energy for electricity, and we're looking at part green energy for gas, using a mix of hydrogen in the mix. So we know that things are moving in this space, and particularly as we start to decarbonize, and for most of you in care homes, you'll be starting to think about, perhaps boiler replacements, particularly if they're coming to end of life, but thinking about replacing with either heat pumps or another renewable source. So so it's quite important to start to think about, that next leg of the journey for you. We also do water procurement. So as the water market's deregulated, we've got access now to improve savings, to make sure that bills are correct. In the past, lots of water bills haven't been correct. They've not been accurate. And certainly at some points, we didn't even know, on some of our sites where we had water meters, because they were basically on perimeters of sites, never been monitored. So it's always good to do a bit of a review, certainly in terms of water procurement. That leads me nicely onto the invoice and bill validation. It's another kind of crucial service. If it's not something that you're already doing, I would strongly advise you all to go through and do certainly a bill review, to make sure that you're on the right tariffs, you're being charged the right rates, you're being charged things like the right KVA. So, how much demand you need for your site. You'll be charged per kilowatt hour on that demand side. So it's important that that's right. That could change if you've descaled or you've scaled up, and you've not changed the maximum demand for the site. So it's really, really important to start to just have a little look. I mean, this is probably an area where you can start to save some real money. So it's worth doing the exercise, although, it tends to be a little bit complicated, and hence, that's why you've got access to people like Zenergi who can do that for you and to help. In terms of energy efficiency services, there's a whole raft of these services that we now provide, but again, it's something that from a compliance point of view that you need to put in place if you haven't got it in place already. And there's things like ESOS, and as I say, the air conditioning inspections, which are your TM44s. And as we move more into thinking more about ventilation, certainly post-COVID, these are some of the areas that you may be considering. But with any kind of ventilation strategy, you need to also think of the compliance side. So let's just make sure we kind of capture everything all in one place for you. If you'd like to move on, Angela. Okay, so one of the crucial areas is sometimes again just obvious things really on bills, and this is just making sure that everything is correct, because there's a big difference if you're being charged 20% and you may be eligible for 5%. So that's that it's a huge difference. So well worth just taking a little bit of time out to have a look at that. So on average, what we find is there's around about a 15 to 20% a saving that you can make. And these are just really simple things. So I mentioned the KVA capacity charge. It's really obvious. It's stated on your bill. It might be per KVA, or it may be maximum demand charge. That's one of those two things. Always check to make sure that the rates are actually correct, that you're being charging. And that all of the calculations that are being made are clear and concise, and that of course that you're not just constantly being charged on estimated reads. So it's just simple things. Just make sure, if you've not got smart meters in place, but make sure you've got the reads in, again, you know, on a regular basis, to make sure that you're going to get accurate bills. You should be getting discounts on direct debits. So these are just a few of the things that you can start to have a look at, or certainly use a service like ours for. And then, yeah, just make sure that all your rates during your mid-billing period are accurate and correct. Okay, so this is really obvious, but obviously the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one that you don't use. So you know, we've done an awful lot with organizations just on very simple things like changing behaviors, you know, and this could be very simply from you know, making the best use of your tariffs and when you're using your energy. So if you're on cheaper rates, for instance, you're on an E7 rate, for example, there could be a lot more that you're using on that rate rather than your expensive rate. It's just things like, you know, considering, you know, your cleaning regimes, and, you know, just a real change in behaviours in terms of water saving and energy saving. And it's always worth just doing that very, very quick, just energy audit. So, you know, just spend, you know, 5 minutes of your day just having a quick look round, just to see, you know, where things have been constantly left on, you know, how long we're actually heating up, you know, cooking equipment in the kitchens, because, you know, I've known staff, you know, to put ovens on kind of first thing in the morning to warm the kitchens up, etc. It's worth doing just very, very quick audits around your home, just to really see where you've got areas of potential wastage. Okay, so within some of our kind of management services, certainly on the energy procurement side, these are some of the screenshots that we start to look at in terms of analysing all of your data, in terms of all of your monthly reads, how much energy could be reduced. We benchmark that against best practice, other care homes, and then we always do budget forecasts against the market. So where's the market moving to in terms of price? This gives you a really clear idea of where you need to start to forecast, where you need to put extra money in. So certainly, if your energy bills are coming to an end within the next 3 or 4 months, you need to now be budgeting in next year's budget for a much higher energy cost, due to, as I said, the gas prices being a lot higher than they were. So on average, at the moment, we're looking at around about you know, 30 to 40% increases in some areas. So it's really worth just having a look to see where you're at. And then obviously, you know, what you could do to try and get a cheaper price, and users services like ourselves, who's got access to more competitive prices, might be an early win for you. Okay, this is, again, it's just understanding your footprint in your own organisation. So you can see here that generally during the middle of the day, when you're doing most of your meals, you've got most of your energy being consumed. You know, your property's warmed up, and obviously you're trying to keep it up to temperature. So that's where your normal kind of profile in terms of your half-hourly data, that's what it could look like. But it's always worth running these, because actually what happens sometimes is it throws up a real kind of problem area. So an area where you wouldn't necessarily think, you know, you could have something, certainly a peak in the middle of the night, and you're thinking, crikey, you know, what's happened in that space there? And just by keeping tighter control over all of your half-hour data, it gives you a clear viewpoint of where you can potentially save. It also gives you a line of where you should be. And as you can see on this half-hour profile, you know, we're peaking above what we would class as normal activity. So again, it just gives you access to really drill down to see, well, actually what's happening there, and is that a constant occurral now that's happening over a period of time. So it's really good to keep on in control of all of that data. Okay, and I mean, this is really obvious, but you know, it is just some really quick areas that you could start to look at around your care home. And for anybody who wants a copy of these slides, so you've got them in more detail, then my email address will come up at the end, and really more than happy to send these out to you so you can sort of keep them as a bit of a reference point. But certainly, you know, as we walk around a care home, we can see, you know, particularly in laundry areas, in kitchen areas, where we can start to really sort of save some money. And it's just things, you know, like reducing the wash, you know, the degrees of the wash cycle. It's looking at the ventilation for that. It's looking at how much we're using the tumble dryers. Is there anything else we can do in those areas? Put timers on, etc. So it's worth a consideration of all of these points. And as I say, that as a law of average, you can save around about 20% just by putting in some good housekeeping practices. Okay, so I mentioned an organisation that we acquired called Briar, and Briar's really good at working out all of your carbon footprint. Now we're hearing this more and more. You know, we know that, you know, there's a climate emergency, and we know that certainly government at the moment is driving an awful lot through funding streams that are linked to decarbonisation plans. So what that means, so I'll break that down so it's nice and simple. What that means for most of us is that we now need to consider putting a heat strategy in place. So what are we going to do when we've got an end of life for our gas boilers? Because it's highly unlikely that we're actually going to replace like for like. But there's things that we need to consider. So if we're considering, okay, so we're going to change those out, we're going to move to heat pumps. Heat pumps are really good, but you need to oversize the radiators. You need to properly insulate the property for that heat pump to give you an equivalent heat output that you're already getting from your gas boiler. So it's not as simple as, okay, at the end of life, we'll just change that out. There's a little bit more of a strategy attached to it, and things that we definitely need to start to consider, you know, as part of that transition. So, you know, and all of this starts with trying to look at what your existing carbon footprint is. So where are we starting from? How can we improve that? And what does that journey start to look like in terms of projects and things that we do need to start to recognise to change out? Okay, so energy audits, this is, again, it's something else that I've talked about quite a lot, but if you don't know where you are at the moment in terms of both your energy, your consumption and your carbon footprint, it is always worth starting right at the start of the process and doing a very simple energy audit. So determine all of your objectives at the start. So one of your objectives may be that actually we've got boilers that are, you know, coming up to 20 years old. We're going to need to consider a change out of those. It may be lighting schemes that you've got to put further LEDs in place. It could be your control strategy and your control philosophy that you need to start to put in place, you know, following COVID, you know, and thinking about ventilation rates, etc. So what we would do, this is a step-by-step approach and something that you guys could do, but look at your last 12 months energy bills. We would then sort of say to you, go and do a site survey, or we could certainly do that for you. but have a good look around to see what improvements could be put in place. And then simple things like, you know, put that final report together with all the recommendations in place, and then try and sort of cost that out. So you've got a bit of a budget going forward. You know how much that budget is going to be, and then you'll know how much you can reduce your carbon footprint by, but also you can offset that against some of the savings that you should be seeing coming through from that change out.
If we could speed it up a bit, please, Gail. We're running out now. Thanks.
Okay, right. So I mean, these are just examples. So these are some of the examples that we've done in some of the care homes. So Orchard Views, we saved around about £5,000. You can see in another example here, we've made a reduction of around about 20 kVA, saving around about 56%. So, you know, to back up what I've said is basically, you know, if you're going to put the time and effort into doing this, you can realize some very significant savings by doing that. And one of the all of these projects that we've listed here, we've got some case studies for those. So if you are interested, we can certainly send you some case studies to support that. Okay. Okay. What value do we place on your time? Which investigated the average customer service times for energy suppliers? Customers were kept waiting on the phone on an average, you know, extensively. And, you know, the types of services that we offer just free up all of that time for you. So not only can we sort of deliver most of those services for you, but actually, you know, it buys back some real time for you guys as well. So yeah, carry on. And that's me. So I don't know how long that's been, but I do tend to talk a lot. So apologies for that.
Thank you.
A lot of material to cover. Hopefully there was something in there that you guys could pick up, and they're my contact details.
Thank you, Gail. Now I'm going to stop the share in a minute, but I'll let people just see that for a bit longer. Are you okay if we put your slides up on our website under our commercial partner area and under workshops, so yes, people can have this as a resource? Thank you. Yeah,
that'll be easier, won't it?
Yeah, right. Here's the news. I work on two screens, and for some reason mine has just switched to the other screen. Right, is that better? No, I've got back to that. Sorry. Right, that's it, done it. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from anybody before we move on to Richard? I think what my experience of these things sometimes, Gail, is that people have to think about this stuff and then they come back to you. And I do remember the windmill care issue. Richard from Windmill Care spoke about that when it was Power Direct, didn't he, at one of our workshops before, and it was very powerful stuff about the saving that he made. So thank you.
But that's the one that we've actually got a really good case study for. So if anybody would like to see that, exactly what they put in place and then the savings they achieved, more than happy to send that out.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Right, over to Richard now from Towergate. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Barnes from Towergate Insurance. We've been commercial partners of Care and Support West for many years. As you probably know me, I manage a portfolio of clients in the social care sector. So all of my insurance clients are care providers of one description or another. Really, the purpose of today is to talk to you about preparing for your insurance renewal. At the moment, things are very difficult in the insurance market, so it's even more important than it ever has been to be well prepared for your insurance renewal. Much like any of your business partners, we would always suggest that you establish a relationship with your insurance broker. Do you know the person at your insurance brokerage who's there to actually manage your account for you, or are you ringing a call centre? It's absolutely vital that you have someone on the end of the phone who you can speak to, who you know, who they know you, and who actually understand what your business is and how you work. so that he or she can paint the best possible picture of your business to insurance companies. If you don't speak to your insurance broker regularly, we would recommend you talk to them at least 90 days in advance of your renewal, which is good practice every year, but even more important this year with the way that things are changing. So as I said earlier, it's a very difficult time in the insurance sector at the moment. We're seeing insurers continuing to withdraw from the social care sector. I can count the number of insurers who are prepared to cover social care on one hand, and I do not need all my fingers. Those who remain providing coverage are increasing their premiums and they are restricting coverage. So it's absolutely vital that you spend time with your insurance broker, making sure that you give them all the information they need to be able to get you the best possible deal, because premiums are increasing and, as I said, cover is restricting. So talk to your broker about what's happening in your business. Talk to them about changes to service users, different income that you may have this year. So as I say, so they can obtain the renewal terms on the best possible basis and also on the correct basis. Make sure you understand at an early stage what additional information insurers are going to require from you in wake of the shrinking market. So most insurers are asking their policyholders to complete infection control questionnaires. This can be despite the fact that they are no longer providing any cover for communicable diseases. Despite that, they're still asking for these infection control questionnaires to be completed, and very often they will not provide renewal terms without a completed infection control questionnaire. So speak to your broker is the key sort of takeaway from this. If your current policy is with an insurer who's decided that they're not going to offer renewal terms, we saw another insurer on Monday announce that they are going to withdraw from providing social care insurance. So if they are with an insurer who's not going to offer you renewal terms this year, you should be prepared to provide additional information for your broker to enable them to provide an alternative quotation from those limited insurers who are continuing to write new business. So absolutely, you may have been with your current insurer for 10 years. The broker needs to treat this as a completely new risk to them and go through a complete fact-finding exercise with you so that they can paint you in the most up-to-date position, because the information that they have on their file could be some years old and could well be therefore completely invalid. We would always suggest that you read your insurance policy, go through this with your broker, make sure you understand the cover that you've got and the exclusions that are in place. You'll often find that there's additional benefits within the insurance policy, such as legal expenses coverage, stress helplines, risk management advice, human resources information. Do you know if your policy includes that? If it does, are you using it? You're paying thousands of pounds a year for your insurance arrangements. Make sure you're squeezing as much value out of those arrangements as possible. And one thing I would always recommend is that you actually look at what the business description of your policy is. Does it just say care home? Do you provide daycare services? Are those daycare services covered if your policy just says care home? Does your policy just say domiciliary care provider? Well, if you're providing sort of high-level care, are those high-level individuals that you're supporting actually covered by your policy? I've got a client who provides personal care to individuals in prison because prison officers don't want to provide personal care themselves. A standard policy isn't going to cover that. Make sure you're speaking to your broker about what you do and the evolving nature of your business so they can make sure that your policy is there to cover you when you need it. Another thing that I'd always suggest is that you speak to your broker about your policies and procedures. It's absolutely vital that these are robust so that they can help you defend a potential claim. With liability claims, employer's liability, public liability, medical malpractice, it's not about you not being covered. It's about you having the policies and procedures in place to enable your insurer to successfully defend your position. If they can't successfully defend your position and claims get paid, which potentially shouldn't have been, then insurers are going to take a dim view of that and your premium's only going to go in one direction and it isn't down. So yes, you need to be able to make sure that you can demonstrate that you always undertake the necessary risk assessment, staff training, care plans are up to date and robust, and this is all suitably documented. Obviously, I'm talking to diverted, I'm teaching you to suck eggs. You'd be surprised the number of claims that come in and staff training records can't be found. Someone injured their back lifting a bag of potatoes in the kitchen, can't find the manual handling training, the claim gets paid, despite the fact that an individual shouldn't have been lifting the bag of potatoes. And really the last couple of things I'd mention is, reporting incidents. Please, please, please don't wait until that solicitor's letter comes through, which can take up to 3 years. Make sure you're speaking to your broker about incidents which happen so they can help you gather that information at an early stage to help you successfully defend the claim. You're not going to be able to gather witness statements of an incident 3 years after it happened. You're not going to be able to get photographs of the scene 3 years after the incident. So speak to your broker about things that are happening. Reporting incidents which have happened is not making a claim. So just be confident that you're speaking to your broker about what's going on. And the final point I'd make is around vaccinations. If a member of staff refuses to take the vaccination, we are not aware of any insurance policy out there which is affected by this. Obviously, things are going to change with the new regulations which are coming into place, but I've had a lot of questions from clients saying, member of staff doesn't want to take the vaccine, am I still covered? Yes. And that's me, Angela. Short and sweet. I'll keep it brief. Hopefully that makes sense. And if anyone's got any questions, happy to take them now, or we can, as I say, take them offline at a later date.
Thank you, Richard. That was terrifying. Some of it, obviously, we've all been hearing so much about insurance being ever more tricky within the sector. So thank you for that. And I really, really endorse what you say about, if you've got incidents, then get your information up together and report it. It's not
100%.
Making a claim, because these things come down the track, as you
absolutely. And again, insurers expect social care providers to have a history of incidents over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
If you're supporting highly vulnerable adults, and you haven't had any incidents in the last 5 years, to be quite honest, insurers aren't going to believe you. They're going to think something strange is going on. So it's much better to have incidents which are reported and closed off at 0 paid, rather than have a blank piece of paper. So
indeed, yeah. Thank you. If you want to pop your contact info in the chat box, then people can pick that up.
I'll do that now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. I'm now going to hand over to Kate, and she's going to talk to us about the Together People programme, and I am going to share screen and do the slides. I can't even say slideshow now, but do that thing. Hopefully it's going to work. Is that okay?
That's great.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you very much, Angela. Yes, I'm sort of having a bit of tech issues my side. So just by way of introduction, so my name's Kate Barnes. I'm the Adult Social Care Programme Manager at South Gloucestershire Council, and I'm one of the local authority reps who sits on the People Board, which is part of the Healthier Together programme, which is the programme that is sort of overseeing the transformation of moving us Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucester together as an integrated care system. So Angela's very kindly invited me along just to give you a bit of an update in terms of what's within that programme and what it means for social care. And there's just a couple of sort of initiatives that I thought you might be interested in and want to have more information about. So I've sort of focused on those, and hopefully sort of it, where my session will lead in quite neatly to the session you're going to have from Citation, which follows it. So Angela, are you happy to sort of thank you very much. So this is just to sort of blind you with a bit of sort of sort of structure, really. I mean, so Healthier Together, the task, as I've said, that's support us get to an integrated care system. So the partners of Healthier Together are the three acutes that we've got. It's all three of the local authorities in our patch. It's Serona, who are our community health provider, and the ambulance service, and sort of, so they collectively make up the sort of the board of Healthier Together. And as you can imagine, the sort of the remit covers all experiences, both acute, primary and secondary, across our system. So that's the sort of the whole collection of all the different transformation work streams.
Give me a call when you're ready.
I think not everyone's got on mute. If everyone could go on mute, that would be helpful, just because we're getting a little bit of feedback. So thank you. And one of those arms or areas of work stream is the people work stream, which, and obviously sort of having the right workforce in place to achieve the ambitions of the integrated care system, which are very much around ensuring that we are moving towards more care within the community rather than being delivered through the acutes, and addressing health inequalities at a place level. So the people aspect of that is really key, and there are a number of sort of work streams that are in place that are about delivering that. It's obviously very much a long-term view and vision. Angela, if you're happy to move on for me, that would be great. So the people programme bit of it is, so that the senior responsible officer that leading that up is Jackie Marshall, who's the director of people at North Bristol Trust, and the programme itself is sort of aligned around all the key sort of workforce activities that you would expect to see about, sort of, supply pipeline, retention, learning and development, and the sort of the future sort of shaping of skills and competencies moving into the forward. So what new roles might this system require? I think it's fair to say that the majority of the programme is very much focused on NHS partners and the integration between NHS and community health partners. However, it is, the system itself is inclusive of social care, and there are elements within the programme that are probably more pertinent and relevant to social care, and I'll sort of talk to some of those in a minute. But I think the other aspect is also the work on the new workforce that's required, and I think some of the active areas of that you will be aware of are the development in terms of the stroke pathway, and the sort of the what is likely to be an increase of skills role in social care supporting that, and also the work being undertaken to put in place the new community mental health contract and way of working, which again will have sort of implications for social care in terms of the ambition being that it's much more of a one-stop shop for people approaching those services, and a more seamless way of working between organisations that are providing different services. So I think those things will have impacts for us. So in terms of representation, so Care and Support West sit within a couple of the sort of the workstream areas within the people programme to represent the sort of your views in terms of this future work. So so Care and Support West sit on the sub workstream that's titled Community, Primary and Social Care, and also on the recruitment and retention work streams, which provides your provider voice into those working areas. So if you can move on for me, Angela. So in terms of areas of interest, promotion and attraction is obviously really key, and there is work both at a sort of the Healthier Together level and across the 3 local authorities. In terms of the Healthier Together aspect, work has been done to look at what has been called the employee offer, and that sort of slide at the bottom titled Meaningful Work is a sort of a representation of some of the materials that are being developed. And the idea is to present the ideas of the careers and opportunities across health and care collectively as a system, and work with schools and colleges and education providers to build on pipeline and attract in, to help people make those links between how careers in care can be developed in their own right, but also can be sort of stepping stones into health and vice versa. So it's trying to present a sort of a collective and view about how parts of the system work together and what the collective opportunities are for people across our patch, and also working with sort of DWP colleagues just in terms of understanding where are the sort of pockets that we can focus on and target. So that includes a sort of a series of work around schools and colleges and promotional events, and which link with the local authority campaigning Proud to Care to make sure that social care is represented at these, but also there's a number of sort of promotional materials which have been used to promote social care opportunities across a number of different sort of health initiatives, including the nurse returners and the vaccination workforce, and people that have not been able to be placed through NHS jobs. So that's, you know, sort of ways that we're beginning to sort of increasingly work across and between health and into social care. The 3 local authorities continue to run the Proud to Care campaign, which is predominantly about promotion and attraction of roles in care through a number of different mediums. And we, of course, have our care ambassadors, which a number of your colleagues are supporting, and we're incredibly grateful for the support they're able to give the campaigns. I think it's fair to say we're probably in the most challenging time we've ever been in terms of recruitment and retention, and that you know, there is no sort of, looks like that's not changing quickly for us. So I think these sort of the broader systems pieces that are looking towards the future about what the nature of work is and how we can sort of meet the pipeline are really important. So again, sort of it's really pleasing that Care and Support West are part of that recruitment group, looking at those sort of longer term solutions. Moving forward, please, Angela. So alongside one of the work streams is around retention, and that's an issue for us all, and a sort of resource is being developed that will be available very soon and available to everybody across health and social care to make use of, is a set of resources that are all about things that you can do to support retention within your workforce. And it's a collection of techniques, tools, materials, training, and it pulls from many existing platforms as well. So Skills for Care materials sort of are represented within this as well. But it provides an online resource that you'll be able to dip in and out of, that may have some useful stuff in there that might give you food for thought and useful to have. So a free resource coming soon. I had hoped it would be available to launch today, but it looks like it's a couple of weeks delayed. So as soon as it's available, I'll let Angela know and make sure she's got the details to send on to you. Moving on. So I particularly wanted to talk about the Healthier Together support network. So again, this is a free resource for anyone working in health and social care. It's been developed in response to COVID, recognising the additional stresses and pressures on the workforce, and needing and recognising the need for retention tools. And so the platform it's a sort of a web platform, and that launched earlier this year. But in that initial stage, it was just some of the training that was available across social care. But from September the 22nd, the whole of the offer will be available for anyone that works in social care. And within it, it's a collection again of resources, wellbeing resources, things that individuals can do themselves, checklists and support available, so both nationally and locally to ourselves. The service is supported by the psychology departments of the acute hospitals, and one of the areas of the offer that will come into play on September 22nd is a counselling offer for staff. And there's also an offer for the psychology teams to work with leaders in the care sector to work on recovery plans for your businesses, for your areas, which I think is quite a unique and hopefully a very positive offer. So I've included the web link in there so you can have a look at those materials that are available currently, and also Tasmin Morey, who's the project manager, will be coming on to the co-produce and Care and Support West network on October the 13th to provide a more in-depth introduction for members as well. Moving on, Angela. And by way of sort of launch of the support network, the service is running a conference that's aimed at registered managers and owners to talk through what that service is, how it can support you, and how you might want that service to be developed in future. It might be around dealing with vaccination hesitancy and the impact of that. It might be dealing with long COVID, both in terms of impact on staff, but also sort of that burnout and COVID fatigue. So I think that it's there are 40 places available, and they can be booked through that number, and there is free lunch, which always makes it a nice little warmer up. So that's essentially what I will cover, and as we get new developments through the people programme, I'll look to bring those to Angela so that they can be shared, and indeed come back and talk to you about them if as and when that feels appropriate and you'd like to invite us back. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kate. I'll just do the stop sharing thing.
Yeah, thank you for doing my slides for me, Angela. That much appreciated.
You're welcome. Just let me deal with this. Okay, thank you very much. And yes, we would love to have you back. I think care providers are in crisis in terms of staffing, so any support is welcome and helpful. So thank you very much. Right, we're only just a little bit running late, which is a miracle on these things, because there's always plenty of opportunity for time slippage. So I will hand over to, I can't see Stuart. Oh, I can see Stuart now. I'll hand over to Stuart. Stuart, Nigel is going to manage your slides, and so I will welcome you from Citation and invite you to make a start. Thank you.
Right, bear with me, guys. Can we all sit, Stuart? Can you see that okay, mate?
Yep, all good.
Good, man. As you can see from Stuart's background, he's the educated one out of the two of us from Citation, with all those books and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, look, guys, we'll blast through this. There's, so Citation, health and safety, HR, care inspections, CQC policies, etc., etc. There's a selection of our partners that we work with. Stuart is one of our on-site HR consultants. So, anything to do with HR, employment law scenarios within your kind of provision, Stuart's the type of person that will come and physically help our clients out with what they need to do. So, not got a lot of time today. Anything on there, anything that you can see in these little circles, we have guidance documents, fact sheets, downloads, etc. we can share with you directly, or we can provide through Care and Support West. So if there's anything on there that you want, just drop me an email. My email's in the chat box. We can give you some more information. Okay. So, like I said, we'll try and make these slides available afterwards as well. But if there's any questions that you need for Stuart, we can pick up at the end or kind of offsite as well. So, Stuart, over to you, mate.
Thank you very much. So thank you, everyone. My name's Stuart Farrer from Citation, as Nigel's already said. I sit within the on-site team. We have our employment law team, quite a few strong, that obviously assist our clients on a day-to-day basis. But I'm within that team. I'm in a team within a team to conduct processes on behalf of clients. And obviously, one of the biggest ones that we're seeing at the moment, certainly in relation to care, and as Kate has already said in her presentation, there is an absolute crisis at the moment in relation to care, and we are seeing quite a lot of uplift in relation to recruitment issues. But the first point I always say with any recruitment drive or with any recruitment process is in the foundation upon which you base everything on. And that's getting the right person through the door in the first place. And there's a number of ways that you can do that. And hopefully when we that free toolkit comes out, Kate, that's going to assist further with the attendees. But ultimately, the foundation upon which everything is based is the advertising for the role in the right place. So advertising the role, getting the right candidate through the front door. But before you do any of that, you need to figure out what's the candidate, or who is the candidate that you need. Because ultimately there's so many different factors, because ultimately every home is different, every team is different, every management structure is different. And in essence, what you need is someone that's going to fit within that. And if you get that part right, you get the job description right, and you're going to get the right person through the door, you're going to get the right candidates through the door. And then ultimately that gives you such a greater foundation upon which to build on. Now, just to go through some figures very quickly, average turnover rate across all employment is 28%. That is exceptionally high. Care industry has got one of the biggest turnovers in relation to roles, it's only, I think, bested by hospitality, and that just goes to show you what sort of state the situation is in. And I think that there is a huge issue at the moment with recruitment and retention across all sectors, but certainly it's very prevalent in the care industry. And as obviously you can see the extra at 30.4%, i.e. it's above average. Now, the last thing on this slide is cost. But perhaps the most important. Now, it's £30,000 is the average cost of recruitment. Now, that may seem very, very high, but the reality is, if you factor everything in, for example, the recruitment costs themselves, the training, even such minor things as uniform, etc., and then you've got on-the-job training when you're allocating someone else to assist them, when that person is in essence buddying up with them. When you combine all of that, the average cost is around £30,000. So if you keep on if you don't get the right candidate through the door in the first place, obviously that knocks on, and that can have quite a detrimental impact. Next slide, please, Nigel. That's okay. So building the right candidate, as I've sort of alluded to earlier, the building the candidate is in essence manual skills, people skills, management skills, and care specific skills. Now, ultimately, what skills do you want that person to have, or what person do you think or skills that person is capable of? People management skills, that can be a raft of possibilities there, but ultimately you're factoring into where they are going to sit within your organisation. So the first two elements tend to be the most important. Management skills obviously relevant if they're going to be joining in higher up your organisation, and care specific skills certainly in relation to any particular care that you may undertake within your organisation also is obviously highly relevant. Now, the advert itself, when you talk about getting the right candidate in, obviously there needs to be a relatively concise job description, because ultimately what you don't want is to get the right candidate through the door and then for them to say 2 weeks after joining you that the role isn't what they expected, because that's a complete waste of everyone's time. So ultimately a good job description is always key, but also to stipulate the skills and desirable skills, job type, preferred background and qualifications and accreditations. And when I talk about, or when it's mentioned preferred background, it's not necessarily their social economic status for obvious reasons, but in essence their background in relation to their experience and where they've come from. Next slide, please, Nigel. So you've got the right thought process in the sense of you've ascertained which candidate you ideally want. You've ascertained the skills that you need, the experience, the job description. You've got all of that. So huge amount of effort gone into the foundation. But then we've got to the interview stage. So I always prefer, and as I stated on the slide, conversation rather than interrogation. So rather than questioning them necessarily, in a panel format, perhaps 5 strong, which would be a bit of overkill. But you get more out of a candidate from conversation. Certainly because when it's a conversation, you start to see them as their natural entity, not someone that they're performing. They're not performing for you, because ultimately, let's face it, an interview does have the possibility of being a slight performance on the part of the candidate. You're actually getting who they are, and that gives you a better understanding of their personality and as to where they're going to fit within your organisation. And I feel there's a number of options there. So competency-based questions, talking about biggest obstacles, how did you resolve it, etc. That's always a good one, quite a common one as well, because you're asking them about a problem and asking them how they resolve it. Because let's face it, care industry is quite fast-paced. You do tend to need someone that's going to think on their feet, or have the ability certainly to, I hate the phrase, but think outside the box. Situational based questions, example, what would you do if? Again, great. I personally use that when interviewing at Citation, because again, we're quite a fast-paced organisation, and ultimately you need someone that's going to be able to come up with an answer to a hypothetical question. And open-ended questions, tell me a bit more about yourself, or talk me through your CV. They're all well and good, but not necessarily as open-ended as that, but focus on where within that CV you want them to talk about. And one other trick, I say trick, I suppose that's the wrong word to use, but one thing I do like to do within interviews is you've conducted the interview, and then you're escorting them, out the building, or you're walking down the corridor towards the front door. Carry on asking questions. Don't dress it up as an interview, but perhaps ask them, maybe that's where you ask the open-ended questions. Tell me about yourself, where are you from, etc. Because ultimately what you're getting is the candidate doesn't most probably realize that you're still interviewing them, but what you're getting is the real person, not the person performing. You're getting the real person, and ultimately if you see a greater understanding of that individual, you're going to have a greater understanding of where they're going to be able to fit. So I always say, carry on with the interview up to the front door. Always a good exercise. Nigel, next slide, please. So recruitment top tips, word of mouth recommendations, still the biggest one. Ultimately, your local reputation in the area is key. Don't limit your advertising. So if you're able to obtain more free spaces, for example, LinkedIn's quite a good one. I see a lot of companies now advertising on LinkedIn. Because it's free, Facebook, various different, social media platforms. If it's free, use it, providing obviously the same advert is stuck to. Provide up-to-date employee documentation. Again, if you're consistent in your approach, if you're consistent in your recruitment process, that gives that candidate a greater belief, a greater, faith that their role is going to be okay, that they are going to be okay in your organization, because ultimately recruitment is a two-way thing. Obviously you have to be happy with them, but they have to be happy with you. So target those actively looking for work. Are you following redundancy due to a pandemic? I mean, ultimately, say for example, if you become aware that a competitor or another organization similar to yourself is unfortunately going through redundancy, there's nothing wrong with perhaps calling up that that organization to say, if there are any people that are being made redundant, please let those candidates know that there are vacancies here. Again, it may seem a little bit cutthroat, but at the end of the day, the candidate's not going to have a problem with that if they're going to be able to have a continuation of employment going from one employer to another. Recruit for attitude and values and train for skill. It's quite a good analogy, really, but qualifications are one thing, experience is one thing, but equally you need to be sure that that candidate has the right attitude for that role and has the right values, because ultimately if you're going into care just for the purpose of a salary, that's possibly not the right value or the right attitude. Care is an incredibly unique and wonderful sector that people are in it because they want to be in it as well. Obviously not saying that they shouldn't be paid for it, obviously, but it's a unique sector. And obviously select wisely, because ultimately, there's no point in just recruiting for the sake of it. You do need, as I say, that right candidate for the role. Next slide, please, Nigel. I think, I'm not sure if we're doing the Kickstart slide.
I was say, do you want me to blast through? I can get some information on that afterwards. So
yeah,
for those of you that aren't aware of it.
Yeah. Okay. So what engaged employees want? Because obviously you've gone through the right process, you've got the great foundation, and you've got the best candidate for the role, and they're working and they're wonderful. Major point to keep retention is to keep that employee engaged, making a difference, using their talents, and positive working environment. Obviously, they're the three sections, but ultimately, if the employee feels that they're making a difference, if they feel that their work is appreciated by the upper management, ultimately that's engagement, and that's an absolute key. Using their talents to the best of their abilities. Ultimately, if they have a particular talent, if they have a particular A game, then ultimately keep using that. And obviously, if they feel that they're going they're going above, or you feel they're going above and beyond, ultimately that manifests itself in the way that you deal with them. Again, it's all about engagement. And a positive working environment is absolutely key. There's always, there can always be that one, person that isn't positive, that may drag people down. That's a separate issue in itself. But if you're able to maintain a positive working environment, somewhere where people want to work, they will stay with you. Next slide, please, Nigel. So inductions and training, again, very important, because ultimately, you've got the right candidate in, they still need to be inducted within the organisation. So developing a proper induction process, I cannot stress enough how important that is. Just very quickly to talk about citation, our induction process is incredibly thorough. It's well mapped out. I only started, I've been doing this about 20 years, I only started with citation in November. When I started, I was given a plan. This is what I needed to achieve by this date, this date, this date, and this date. And it was incredibly well structured. Yes, it was fluid, but I knew what was expected of me and I knew who I could rely upon in order to successfully complete my induction process. We were talking about, for example, maybe like a form of hub that people can go to, an organizational chart that people can go to, certainly in relation to larger organizations. You know, who's responsible for what, who's answerable to who. Again, we have that at citations. When I first started, I did not have a Scooby-Doo where I could go for certain things, but ultimately there was an organizational chart that I could go to, I was made aware of, and that solved an awful lot of anxiety because ultimately I knew exactly who I should speak to. And again, that's all part of a proper induction process. If you're dealing with perhaps a particular area of your business that, you know, a mentoring system would be of benefit, again, consider that. Certainly a buddy system is always very good. If you've got a brand new employee that's never been in care before, and that applies to young, middle-aged or mature, then ultimately, and they've never been in care, it's always helpful to have a mentoring system, a buddy perhaps that they can go to, a more senior carer perhaps. Team building is another good one. So little exercises. I mean, last year during the pandemic, because we couldn't all meet up with our colleagues, we had a choir that was created. We had lip syncing competitions. We had all sorts, and it was a great form of team building. We couldn't meet each other, we couldn't see each other, but we still felt part of a team. So little things like that, there are those experience days and things. They don't cost a lot of money, and ultimately they make people feel part of the organization. They're not just a number, they're not just an employee, they genuinely feel part of a team. And again, that goes to, improving self-worth in the organization, because, feeling respected and appreciated is absolute key. Exit interviews, slightly weird one, but I'm a big favor of them in relation to recruitment and retention, because ultimately what you want to assure yourself is, why is that person leaving? Sometimes you might know, they may be going off to further their career, they may be going off to concentrate on other projects, but it's always helpful to have an exit interview, certainly if a number of people are leaving in a short period of time, because you want to make sure that there isn't something else going on that you do not, or you are not aware of. And exit interviews are good because they help you have a better understanding of what's going on the ground. And training line managers, again, absolutely key to the foundation of retention, because ultimately it's all well and good being a manager or a senior carer or someone that has management responsibilities over those within the organization, but the reality is they're going to need to be trained as to how to manage. Yes, they may be very good carers, they may be very good medically, they may have qualifications coming out everywhere, but at the end of the day, if they're not a people person, if they are not able to manage, then really they're not a leader. So we need to invest in them in order to further their career. And talking about people stepping into health, what Kate was saying just now, it's important to develop people within your organization, certainly if this is a brand new step, and if you've got better trained managers, then ultimately the retention rate's going to increase. It can only help. Training is always good. So note to self, sort out parking for a new starter. And did you know that employees who have a proper induction are 70% more likely to stay at a business for 3 or more years? Well, I can only agree with that from my own personal experience with citation. I mean, I've gone to employers where literally I've been told, there's your office, there's your assistant, happy days, see you in a couple of weeks' time. And again, you have absolutely no idea what's expected of you. There's that uncertainty, that gnawing feeling that perhaps you've made the wrong choice. If you've got a proper induction, it can only help. It gives that employee the confidence that they need, certainly when they're starting a new career. Nigel, next slide, please. Employee wellbeing. So going through some figures there. Work-related ill health cases reported 1.6 million. You can appreciate that's an awful lot of downtime. Of these cases were due to stress, anxiety, or depression, 51%. massive increase at the moment. Well, over the last couple of years, certainly, I've noticed. Mental health, I think, is something that we don't know the true extent of this pandemic as to what it's caused, but we are seeing some very strange cases at the minute that would indicate that the mental health of the employees is suffering significantly, and I don't think that we are fully aware of the effects of the pandemic yet, because ultimately I think it's going to be a couple of years before it all comes out in the wash. But certainly mental health issues, even just low spectrum anxiety, stress and depression, they're coming right through, and again, it's a question of recognizing that and being there to provide that required support to the employee, because again, an employee that's provided with assistance is appreciated, they will stay. And obviously all of that combined, working days lost, 19.8 million. Next slide, please, Nigel. Okay, so ways to monitor the well-being of your staff: open door policy, employee assistance program. I think we have one at Citation that is provided to clients. Again, it's all about support, that employee realizing that they're supported in the workplace. Encouraging physical activity. We have a bike to work scheme, I believe, Nigel, don't we? I live about a 3-hour drive away from the office, so I won't be biking in any way, shape or form, quite frankly, but ultimately, yes, there is that scheme available to our employees if they wish. Starter buddy system we've talked about. They are wonderful opportunities. So maybe you've got someone that's very experienced, that's not necessarily a senior carer, it can just be another carer, they're at the same level, but they are really experienced, they are a real great fit. They don't necessarily want the stress of being a senior carer, but they might be the absolute perfect buddy system just to make sure that person is okay. You can then have a dialogue with them just to see how the new starters are doing. Checking in with staff just to make sure they're okay, taking breaks, etc. Again, absolutely great. During my induction, I'm just talking about personal experiences now, but at Citation, there was a weekly chat with one of the managers. And then as the induction progressed, then there was inductions with, senior leaders, director level, head of departments, etc. And they were just checking in. It's all scheduled into their work diary. And it was like literally just a 5-minute chat, but it was nice to actually physically speak to these people. I mean, the reality is I'm mostly not going to speak to them again for quite some time. But again, they were taking time out of their day just to make sure I was okay. And again, it does make you feel appreciated. So regularly asking staff how they're feeling and taking time to listen. I mean, ultimately, that can just be literally passing in the corridor. How's everything going? Are you enjoying your role? You get a feeling, certainly if you're working in the care sector, you tend to get a feeling that perhaps everything isn't right. Make a mental note of that. Obviously just to perhaps have a bit of a more in-depth conversation with that employee going forwards, but also just being there in case they need to speak to you. Allowing staff to have breathers and reset and recharge. Obviously, that's just ensuring that they're having their breaks, they're having their weekly rest periods. They're not overworked. They're not, ultimately, if they're wanting extra shifts, etc., that's all well and good, but you need to be able to keep a lid on that to make sure that they're not burning out. Working together for difficult decisions. I mean, ultimately, if there's a process that needs to be started, capability, ill health, discipline, or anything like that, always engage with the employee to work through it. It's always helpful to have two-way participation. Keeping staff informed, obviously, absolutely key. End of shift wellbeing checks, driving safely, obviously. If, say, for example, someone's had a particularly difficult shift, perhaps that, there's been something horrible happen within the home, perhaps it was a resident that they were, close to, etc. Again, yes, that's commonplace maybe within the organisation, within the sector, but the reality is if they've just started with you, if they're relatively young or inexperienced, it's again just making sure you're having that conversation with them to make sure they're okay, to make sure that they feel supported, and again, that's only going to wait them attention. Next slide, please, Nigel.
Cool. Angela, I'm just conscious of time, so do you want us? How do you want to play this? Do you want us to just blast through this real quick, or do you want us to?
Yeah, I think if we could move it on, please, because we're 15 minutes over time or about, and
sorry,
so we'll have other things booked.
Yeah, because I was going to say,
you.
they've got some stuff, but there's quite a few slides left. So what I think we should do, we can do the next two, yeah, and then what I'll do, I'll let you have the content, and then we'll just kind of pick up on anything else off the back of that. All right? Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is there's going to be if there's information for people to come back to you after.
Yeah, well, I think the best thing on this, they can have these slides. We'll do the next two because they're quite solid. And then my email's in the chat function. So if they want anything else off the back of it, then they can get on and crack on, yeah?
That's great. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so we'll quickly then. So importance of having robust HR foundations. So having a clear foundation, including transparent policies and procedures, it provides structure, it provides consistency, it provides control to your organisation, absolutely key. Now, obviously, Citation can help with that. We do have an entire team that is tasked with updating policies and procedures, etc., handbooks. But again, it ensures compliance with the legislation. It keeps you protected. Also sets out expectations, what's required from the employee and what's required from the employer, so everyone knows where they stand. Ensures employees are aware of the rules and procedures in the workplace, and obviously identifies relevant training is done. Again, the biggest one is in relation to conduct, but ultimately, if the employees know what's expected of them, they should stick to it. Next slide, please, Nigel. Contracts and handbooks. In essence, what you need to make sure is that you have an up-to-date, compliant employee handbook. They're quite a big document, certainly in relation to the policies that are, sometimes hyperlinked within it. Certainly in relation to safeguarding, etc. Again, make sure it's up to date, and again, we can help there. Handbooks, that they can sometimes be 60 pages long, they can sometimes be 200 pages long. It needs to be specific to your organisation. Obviously, don't have a load of policies and procedures in there that are just simply not going to be relevant. And again, that can, conducting a review on that, is going to be very helpful. Employees do need to have access to one. They don't necessarily need to have a copy in relation to the handbook. They obviously do need a copy of their contract, but they just need to have access to an employee handbook. And it's always best to have it signed or at least acknowledged by the employee. We have an Atlas system whereby they sign electronically to confirm they've read and understood it. And again, that all forms part of their employee file. And it's exceptionally important to have, because ultimately, if, say, for example, you do need to discipline them, if there is a conduct issue and they simply say, well, I wasn't aware that was a policy or a requirement, if they've signed the employee handbook and it's in there, then you can have that to refer back to. But again, it's just a consistency of approach and making the employees aware of what's required of them. That's it then for that slide.
Perfect.
That's the only two.
Yeah, right. Well, what I'll do, I'll stop sharing. Angela, you can take the reins back. And you on mute. There you go.
Thanks everybody. I think we'll wrap it up now. It's been a really full morning, and I'm very grateful to all of you. Gail from Zenergi, Richard from Towergate, Kate messaged me to say that the technology had finally booted her out. She apologised, but we will get her back. And thank you to Stuart and Nigel, the great double act, for Citation on that really, really useful stuff. Stuart is an HR person by profession myself. I couldn't agree more about the value of a solid induction, making people feel valued, helping them understand what their role is. All of that stuff really helps. And as I keep saying to people, the better you are at retention, the less recruitment you'll have to do. So, and recruitment's the nightmare that everybody's up against at the moment. So thank you all. I know that your contact info is there in the chat. I'm going to switch off the recording and close the meeting, but just to say all of the information will be on the Care and Support West website as soon as I can manage the technology through my very helpful colleague. So thank you all very much.